Yo. Sorry, I didn't expect it to come on just like that. How's everyone doing? Anyone here? No? Cool. By myself. Nice. Gotta go remind folks. I'm planning to talk about vacated targets a little bit. That's my baseline. That's my assumption of what we're going to be talking about. But, if anyone wants to talk about something else, let me know. Sorry, I got in literally at 2, so getting set up is a bit of a thing. Vacated targets, right. There was something I was looking at. It's a toss-up between doing vacated targets for YouTube and Twitch. Hey, wherever you are. Or doing it for the podcast, and I went with wide receiver trends on the podcast, so I guess I have to go with vacated targets here. I just sent in my article. Finally did the first, at least the first, there's a lot more to say, but yeah, it must be that one. For vacated targets to DLF, haven't heard anything back, so it's either terrible or great, or they haven't seen it yet, one or the other. But I sent it direct to the editor on a counter. He normally has to put in a little bit of extra work with me anyway. All right, we're set up. See if we can get in on here. I got 2 people watching. How you doing? All right, so vacated targets. I'm just going to start talking. Let's see. When players leave or are unavailable for a season, their targets or their volume, in fact, where we do it for a lot of things, sometimes called vacated. That's what vacated targets are. The players have left, they're not available, but they had this much volume last year. On the face of it, it makes a lot of sense for most people when they hear it, until you start asking questions like, how can you know how many targets are missing from a passing offense that hasn't happened yet? For example, despite the fact that passing attempts for teams are remarkably consistent, there are actually wild swings, even on fairly consistent passing offense. For example, Atlanta doesn't feel like they passed any more or less last season, right? But they actually passed over 100 times less than they did the year before, even with only 85 vacated targets. Baltimore, on the other hand, projects, if we use that stability of the passing offense, passing attempts year to year, they actually passed over 180 times less than we'd expect in 2019 compared to 2018. And that's in a year where the team really had a boon, right? The quarterback became the most valuable rookie and the most valuable player in the National Football League. Mark Andrews broke out, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, passing attempts are stable, but we also lose them and gain them on a yearly basis, even for teams that actually have fairly stable and consistent passing volume. So targets missing from presumed target distributions or passing attempts don't make sense on the surface. But when you look a little closer, you can see that there's a lot of holes in this argument. So one of my problems with it is we haven't actually established any norms. Like like I just said, Atlanta lost 85 targets going into 2019. Is that normal? Like, I would imagine teams who lose more targets than that, right? Because you've got, wide receiver 5 and drafted guy that got a couple of 2 from the 5th round, but they can't afford to keep carrying them when they need another running back, or running backs move on enough teams and they get targets all the time. So 85 seems low. But in no vacated target article that I can find or could find, could I get a sense of what's a lot of targets and what's a little bit of targets? Now, I did recently read one from, I think it was Fantasy Points, the new website. I can't remember. Sorry. But they were talking about percentage of team targets lost. And that gives you a little context, right? 26% of the team's targets were lost last year. Okay, so I have a context to how much of those raw targets actually meant to the offense. Great. But is 26% normal? Do teams usually vacate like less than 10? More than 20? There's still not a lot of what's the background here? What's the landscape we're walking in? And so that's what I've basically done for my first article. I laid out the data. I used Addison Hayes' data. He's the one from FS Statistics. He now makes most of the apps and graphs from, hey, J-Mike. He now makes most of the apps over at DLF. I'm just ranting about vacated targets for a while until someone asks something more interesting, J-Mike. So yeah, and he used it to come up with some basic averages that could tell us the landscape. And then I looked at the examples of breakout players, because that's normally when it's used. Chris Godwin broke out because the team vacated over 200 targets. Well, first, is that a lot of targets? And two, how often do players break out on teams that have lost that kind of volume? Correct me if I'm wrong, but you've never read a tweet storm or an article that gave you that very simple context, and that's suspicious. If nothing else, if someone's using stats but they haven't bothered to go and find out if that stat's high or low, then they're probably making a narrative argument, which is fine, but lying with stats isn't fine. You know, that's confusing. Stats convey some sort of authority. Oh, it's got a number on it, therefore it must be accurate. But no, maybe not. Maybe not. And I just don't know. Now, I haven't gone through the data. I think vacated targets has some utility, but it's a lot less than you might think. For example, it's less than draft capital. Draft capital can give you a better hit rate on who's going to break out. So can college production. So can career arc, for example. People break out in their second year more often than people break out on the most heavily vacated target teams. So it's not that it's not useful. It's not that we can't use it. But we should know what it is, right? So the first thing I did, is just establish some averages. Share screen. This one. Can you see this? So what I did in the article is I just posted this basic table. I just looked at the data since 2007 to 2019, and I found that teams on average vacate around 138 targets from one season to the next. So 138 is average, basically, around 140. Hey, Spaceman. And that accounts for about 26% on average of the passing offense. Now, let's be clear that 26% isn't 138 is 26% of the average team's For example, the average passing offense is 550. And if we take, the percentage of those average targets from the average passing offense, I think it's like 4% or so. Oh, it's about 26%. But that's not what that number is. This is the average of all teams. So some teams vacate 70%. We've got up there once. And some teams vacate 0%. And the average of those, all those percentages since 2007 is around 26%. Now, the average change from year to year is only about 0.81%. Again, that speaks to the consistency of the passing offense, right? Passing attempts are remarkably consistent. But again, if you look at individual year to years, like what I did is actually created a very simple model to project 2019 passing attempts using 2018 passing attempts. And this is so consistent, right, that you'd think it would be really useful. Hey, thanks. Yeah, haircut. Yeah, my wife caught me when I was watching TV, so she cut off all my hair. But if we use 2018 to project 2019, that's where the Baltimore-Atlanta examples come from. Despite having very little variance, and in fact, it tests as very good R-squared, you're projecting with like 4 or 5 target errors or passing attempt errors as a standard error. What it means is Baltimore is projected to throw 180 times more than it actually did, and Atlanta was projected to throw 160 times less than it did. So it being consistent does not mean we know what the passing offense is going to look like next year. It's just how some of these numbers can lie to us a little bit. And when a wide receiver breaks out on a team, that team is typically vacated about 162 targets. You can see that's actually slightly elevated from the average, but not by much. It's within the average range, right? On teams where tight ends break out, because I did both type of pass catches, around 141 targets have been vacated from the following year. So the distribution of that is what we're interested in, right? Is it just a few guys vacating 0 and then everyone else vacating 200, or so on and so forth? But the average, again, just to establish the landscape we're walking, is 141. Again, slightly elevated from the average, but pretty much exactly the average, right? And wide receiver breakouts actually average 121 targets since 2007. I just thought that was interesting and worth throwing in. Tight end breakouts, breaking out into the top 12. Wide receivers breaking out into the top 24. But the tight end breakouts average around 90 targets. And that's the other thing. The volume vacated from the year before, and the targets acquired by breakout players in no way correlate. Like, you can't really say that Mark Andrews' 83, 82, 85 targets last year correlates to the 200 targets that Baltimore lost. Like, the numbers don't add up, literally. So we get to more interesting questions later. Anyway, the average pass attempt change with a breakout wide receiver, that teams actually pass slightly more if they have a breakout, but again, actually round about the same they did from the year before. So actually, one of the things that I found is looking through the history is that the most common situation for a breakout wide receiver or tight end to happen is stability. And I'm not joking about that either. The most common team situation for a breakout wide receiver or tight end to happen is when the team is stable from one year to the next, not when they have a wild swing with vacated targets or added targets, or it's when the team presents stability. That's where the majority of breakouts happen. Now, the rate gets a little bit more interesting, but if you're looking for a breakout player at the tight end or wide receiver position, or both, stability is pretty much what you want. And I think that's what we're getting to with vacated targets. I think vacated targets is a keener window into what a team intends. But the problem is, we could only read what someone else intends so well. Like, teams are vacant. Okay. So when was it? I forget when Vincent Jackson left San Diego, 2011, something like that. The team vacated over 200 targets that year, but no one broke out the next year. Maybe that's because the team was resetting and that was their intention. But we could have looked at that and gone, they intend for this wide receiver 4 to break out. They think it's really comfortable. So our reading of someone else's intention is fraught with all the problems of reading someone else's mind. And the other thing is, teams can get it wrong. Like, I think genuinely that Deshaun Jackson and Adam Humphries was let go between 2018 and 2019 because they felt very comfortable with Chris Godwin on the team, right? And that proved true in 2019. But if Chris Godwin hadn't been good, it just wouldn't have happened anyway. So teams can get it wrong, and we can read team intention wrong, and that's why it's not proving as a better predictor than anything else. It's in there, it's useful, but I don't think we know how it's useful in relation to those other things yet. All right, so let me point out some other stuff here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to see this on the quality of anyway. And what I've got here is, since 2007, this is the percentage, the buckets I created right here for teams' percentage of targets lost from one year to the next. So in this bucket, teams lost between 0 and 10%, and it's binning and averaging, right? In this bucket, it's 10 to 20%, and that's the percentage of the targets that they lost from year over year. This is the count of the teams, and it's important to pay attention to that. Like, once a team vacated over 70% of the targets, and once a team vacated over 80% of the targets, but it's only happened twice in how many years is that? Like 12 years, right? No, 12, 23 years. So I don't know, since 2007. So it does not happen a lot. I think one of these teams is New England, and the breakout is Julian Edelman, by the way. And I have the breakouts in this data as well. Chill. All right. So the most common, like we said, the most common amount of targets broken out is around 138, which happens in this bucket, around 20 to 30% of the targets from the year before. And as you can see, that's where the most wide receiver breakouts happen. It's also where the most tight end breakouts happen. And you can also see that there's significant players that happen below average. So a below average amount of targets have been vacated, and wide receivers and tight ends are breaking out. In fact, this is where the majority of breakouts happen if we were to add up all the numbers. However, because I'm, fair-minded, I did the rate. The rate's what we're interested in. And you do see, until we get to silly sample sizes like 1, 1, and 7. Let's just ignore this for a second. And there is a decreasing sample size, but we'll take a 24 sample size. We can see a slight increase in breakouts at the wide receiver position, the more volume that's vacated. So, 24 teams have vacated between 50 and 60% of the targets. 10 wide receivers broke out on those teams, a top 24 season for the first time. That's a 41% breakout rate, which is great. Still below first round draft capital, by the way, but it is great that it's twice as likely for a player to break out with this level of volume than the average level of volume. That's interesting. But do remember that if you just kept betting on good players on average level volume vacated teams, like these are really good wide receivers. It's not like this is Antonio Brown and AJ Green and this is, Cole Beasley or whatever. No, like this down here is Devontae Adams, for example. Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, like great wide receivers happen across this spectrum. Because one of the things I've heard, Zach Reed likes to challenge me with it, is that vacated targets make wide receiver breakouts easier. And I don't really know how to measure that or track that. But one of the things that would seem to be true to me is that worse players break out if there's more vacated targets, right? Because that would mean the breakout is easier because they're not as good. That doesn't seem to be the case either. Again, everything that I've looked at still continues to confirm for me the vacated targets don't really relate to what the player does. I think it's telling us about team intent, and that's tricky. Oh, I got more comments. Hey, Spaceman. Hey, Crossover. Hey, Mr. Ruggs. How you doing? Crossover Corporate. Take 1, take 2. Lyrics from a song. I don't know what that means. Okay. Ruggs and Mr. Crossover are having a conversation. I shouldn't really got involved, I guess. Where was I? Interesting enough, for tight ends, we can be a lot firmer. Not only do most wide receiver tight ends break out on average level offenses, but it actually has the highest breakout rate. Now, if you want to go up to the silly level of volume, the 60 to 70%, there is almost as high a rate. Like it happened, there's 7 teams and there's 1 breakout. And that relates to like a 14% breakout rate. But no, the breakout rate for tight ends is actually most believable and most consistent when we get to the average level of volume. Now, you can see a slight increase in the percent here, but it's just, I don't think it's believable on this particular sample size. So yeah, like 36 tight end breakouts happened on average level volume. And again, I don't think the quality of breakout is spoken to by the level of vacated targets as well. So I don't think I can't conclude that it makes it easier, but I do understand what Zach's saying when he says that. All right. Here I've tracked the percentage of passing attempt to increase or decline. You can see teams that vacate incredible amounts of volume. Also, just pass less. They're just as likely to pass less as pass more the next season. So you don't have to fill those vacated targets either. They're just going to go away. And I've got some other tables in here, which I'm bored about. I'm bored of reading it. So breakout players. Something I was doing was looking at like tight end breakouts because someone wrote an article. And it was a great article. I enjoyed reading it. And it had interesting facts in it. But they were using vacated targets too. This is every breakout wide receiver or tight end since 2007, by the way. There we go. And they were saying that teams that vacate around 70% of their offense or more, greater or equal to. And no, I've done that wrong. Okay. What did Waller break out on? 67%. Okay. So if we go to teams that vacated 0.65, well, let's just do 0.6 so we can get a few extra teams in here. Nope. Okay. There were like, I don't know what's coming on here, but there are like 5 teams since 2007 that have vacated similar levels of volume. And Darren Waller is the only breakout on that list. Like literally the only tight end breakout on that list. All right. Oh, that's why I'm expecting it to be. There we go. There we go. So here are all teams since 2001, but I don't have breakout players tracked until 2007. So these teams all vacated more than 60% of their targets, and the only breakouts that turn up on that list are Darren Waller and Julian Edelman. Now, if we go to a 50% threshold, again, this is what the table was showing us. Where we go to a more common, and then we do see about 11 wide receiver breakouts on teams that have vacated about 50% of the targets, which is pretty good, but that works out to about a 30% hit rate, which is just about less than everything else we use as a breakout indicator, but it is useful. It is interesting to know. And it is also interesting to keep in mind all these other teams that just didn't see a breakout despite the fact they vacated all those targets, and it's happened a lot very recently, so this isn't like a new trend or anything. Now, one thing I would say is, again, Vincent Jackson moved from San Diego to Tampa, right, and then broke out. Well, he didn't break out, but he did have a wide receiver 1 season, wide receiver 2 season. It was a really good season. But he's not counted as a breakout because he'd already broken out before. So my rate stroke might be affected by, players that are good transferring and then remaining good. Like I'm not capturing a lot of that when looking just at breakouts. But overall, I think the averages are going to tell us the most of the story, which is that there is a higher rate, but it's not worth betting on over draft capital or player evaluation, right? Especially not when the majority of breakouts happen, or the most common situation for a breakout to happen is stability or average level of volume in and out. I have yet to track added targets, which is something I'm actually really interested in as a counterpoint to vacated targets, which is just, every year the team adds as well as subtracts targets. Like Delaney Walker leaves the Titans, but they also acquire players, and so you could see them as added targets, right? I don't know why I'm gesticulating. I'm acting away over here, and you can't even see me. All right, there we go. So added targets is something I want to look at. I did look at it briefly, and it basically obviously looked like the inverse of the vacated targets graph, which again, it just indicates that stability is almost the perfect situation for a breakout, especially wide receiver to happen, or especially tight end to happen. Wide receivers get a little more frisky when there's more vacated targets, but you're still better off betting on pretty much anything about the player, what they've done. And breakout indicators include efficiency, they include career arc, they include draft capital and college production. That's about it. Yeah, the targets disappear a lot. I don't think I have a quick and easy graphic for that, but I did point it out in the article. Sometimes teams just pass less. In fact, a lot of times teams just pass less. Well, this is, I guess, it. When they vacate, 80 to 90% of the targets that happened once, they just declined a bit. No, they actually increased 23%, but you can see that teams consistently decrease in overall passing percentage of maintaining their passing attempts, the more volume they lose. In fact, they're probably a little more likely to pass less the following year, if anything. But anyway, I think this is the best thing I got out of the article because, sorry, I forgot again. This little table over here, because again, no one had even established, as far as I could tell, what normal looks like, and you can't really tell what an extreme situation is unless you know what normal looks like. Don't tell me a team lost 200 targets as if it means anything. Give me context. Do teams normally vacate 200 targets? I don't know. It depends on the passing volume, frankly. Teams normally vacate about 26% of their targets from one year to the next. So how much is that 26%? How much is that 200 targets compared to the year before? I think that's a better way of looking at it. No, coaching doesn't matter. Coaching consistency matters. And I think you're just going to grab more signal from elsewhere, right? Bill Belichick's going to make coaching consistency look remarkably good for New England, but the Bengals stuck with the same guy forever, so that's not going to make it look good. I think that's case by case more than anything else. And as it relates to vacated targets, like I can't even imagine how much we'd have to bin everything to use those two variables. Coaches don't stay with teams long, often. No, they don't. Some coaches love certain players, they force feed them. I don't believe that. I mean, I get it. I can see why in some individual, it's like everything. In an individual situation, you can say, okay, well, they're force feeding that guy. But on a whole, coaches can't make those decisions. Targets flow based on players. So you can't force feed Laquan Treadmore. Or believe me, Minnesota would have gotten rid of Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen. They wanted that to happen. You can't force feed some players if they're not good. You can't. Targets are dependent on the player more than anything else. Passing attempts, passing success, all of that has a lot to do with QB. All of that has something to do with the coach. But in terms of the way targets flow, the main dominating factor, like the factor of 8-1, it's the player. It's a player. It's a player. It's a player. Player. And so they might. Some coaches seem to have preference to positions, but that's, again, when you look at an individual, you might find a trend that you can believe in, right? But if you look at a broad picture, on a whole, we can't say that about coaches. We can't be able to say that about Shanahan, if you want. And someone was making an argument for tight ends and O.J. Howard, I think, the other day, but I don't know how they got there from Bruce Arians, so I'm probably remembering the one. No, it was Hayden Hurst, right? Whoever his coach is likes to do it. But like, I've tracked the players because that's where most of the signal comes from. And the funny thing is, when good players leave, coaches suddenly don't care about the position as much as they did the year before. It's the players, man. It's the players. I mean, maybe sometimes you'll capture some tendencies and it works out because this player is above average. But I mean, there's a reason New Orleans hasn't had a decent tight end until Jared Cook came along between him and Jimmy Graham. There's a reason Jimmy Graham had a higher level volume when he went to the Seahawks and when he went to Green Bay than any other tight end had since the last good tight end they had. It's a player. And that's a diminished Jimmy Graham, by the way. It's the player. It's the player. It's the player. I mean, we get it right sometimes betting on coaches. And so it feels like, this can work. And so I don't want to discourage you because this is all small sample size. And what do I know? If it's working for you, let it work. But a broad view of the data says you're going to get it wrong more often than you get it right if you care about coaching tendencies or what the coaches want or who the coach wants to target if the player isn't capable of it. But yeah, again, whatever works, man. I get beat all the time, so they're probably using coaching tendencies for all I know. But like, who else just recently left? There's Jimmy Graham. Atlanta lost a Hall of Fame tight end and didn't have another good one till Austin Hooper. I think that's because they didn't want one. Gronkleys, New England doesn't have a good tight end anymore. Do you think that's because they don't want one anymore? Targets go with the player. And I even track this from a player basis as well. And it is, obviously we know it's very true. Players struggle on new teams. But their volume, especially when you adjust for level of player, it's remarkably consistent. Remember that Odell Beckham had more targets after going to the Browns from the New York Jets. Like his percentage was, he's like 26% target share. It's like, that's where the targets went, man. I mean, his volume was fine. He was a little under efficient, which again is also typical for a player switching teams. And then you add in, everyone wanting to, talk about how the Browns' schedule sucked. But the majority of the signal for targets and where they go and who gets a lot is about the player. It's why Tyler Boyd will never be AJ Green. And I love Tyler Boyd. So in on him on the rookie draft. I had him ranked over Michael Thomas significantly. And third-year breakout. I think he's a great player. He's just not AJ Green. That's okay. Kevin Ridley's a great player too. He's not Julio Jones. He can't. Both of these players can have top 12 seasons in the way that variance can strike for good players. Don't get me wrong. But like neither of them have proven to be target dominant in the way Julio Jones or DeAndre Hopkins or Keenan Allen. Like these are just different types of players. They're just different. And it works similarly for tight end too. You don't get even Jason Witten. We couldn't even replace Jason Witten with good athletic young guy behind him. It's the player. And yes, especially with tight end, it does seem a little bit more team dependent. Like Jimmy Graham did more than any tight end ever had since the last good one they had, but he still wasn't able to do what Jimmy Graham does. So it's not like the team, the inclination of the quarterback and coach. I mean, it's all fitting together somehow. I can just tell you that the number one variable, the one that we can actually lean on and get it right more often than wrong, is the player, quality of the player. And so when you're looking at Sternberger, for example, in Green Bay, right? Like, I like the player on the sense that he's a decent tight end prospect, but so many are. Not because Jimmy Graham just made that position look slightly better, I liked Austin Hooper, but not because they used to have Tony Gonzalez, and because of Austin Hooper's profile. Like, it's when the two mesh, great. We're using icing on top of a very nice cake, but the cake is a signal from the player. How good has the player proven to be? And plenty of breakouts or, unexpected value from drafts don't show up. Like Chris Godwin had a good rookie season, all right. Year 2, pretty good. We could only say that we could see last year coming because he had such a great profile. But it feels like vacated targets could have lent us yes. But if you look at the list of players it would have lent you away from, you don't want Chris Godwin. I'd rather have that other list. Like the players it turned you off of is like, I'd rather have all of those guys than just hit on one Chris Godwin. And so using it as icing is nice. Because, it would have helped you keep. But if you're a serious dynasty player and you gave up on Chris Godwin, quit. To redraft. There was no reason to quit on Chris Godwin. Like, no serious dynasty player was like, oh, I don't know about this Chris Godwin guy going into year 2, year 3. Like, his value was still fine. He was up. We were expecting good things. Scott Barrett was up on Twitter saying, look, he could be a top 12 guy before the season, before drafts. No one faded Chris Godwin, who was actually, decent at dynasty. So it's not like we needed the icing to get Godwin, but it did or would have if we followed it blindly. And obviously we don't follow anything blindly. Like you would never have liked Jarvis Landry. He's had 2 top 12 seasons. You wouldn't like him last year, especially with Odell Beckham added in, and he ended up in the top 12 again. Like the list of players that we miss by believing in it as a primary function, as a part of the cake that we should be eating, not the icing that, it's fine to layer on top. I'd rather have the other list of players. That's what I'm saying. And again, I think all you have to do is see targets as a function, or vacated target as a function of team signal. The team want this. Great, I think. Cool. Are the team right? Okay, well, let's look at the player, right? And there you get to the cake. It's not like it's not important. And there's lots of utility. Again, you can't look at these rates and say that it doesn't matter. There's a higher breakout rate for players on teams that have more targets. And that's true at the wide receiver position. And it's true, it's not true at the tight end position, but it's true at the wide receiver position. And if we combine both overall, it stays true. So, I would be insincere to say it doesn't matter. Teams, coaches, quarterbacks are having input on where these targets go. But as far as data that we can use, or that I can use, because I'm just a dummy, I get it, I belong in the Dynasty Dummies. that I can find utility in for finding and highlighting and trying to get the right player at the right time. All of that signal comes from the player, not from this broad view team level. Yeah, again, and it's all this. I think this is what everyone's saying. It's not like, fuck, man. Evan Silver talks about vacated targets. John Daigle tracks them. Matt Kelly talks about them constantly. All of those people know this. I'm worried about the grinders like me who hear that and go, oh, okay. So that means I should go draft every wide receiver behind Devontae Adams in 2009. Nice. That's not what it means. Like they are using them skillfully. They're using them as icing and an understanding of team intent. I didn't really understand what they were, so I just kept arguing against them. And when I tracked it down, this is how those good dynasty players giving us advice are using them. And I can back up what they're saying this way, that it's about team intent. Sometimes teams are wrong. Sometimes the players aren't good enough. Sometimes we read the intent wrong. But vacated targets and the change in rosters, essentially from 1 year to another, do tell us a lot about what the team is intending if we can guess that intention correctly. But as far as the way target, and that's all about passing attempts and rushing attempts. Like it's pretty easy to see that Baltimore want to rush, right? Like I'm not dissuading anyone from that argument, and nor do I intend to. But they will pass a little bit more coming. Like it's all readable based on team intent. Do they have and the next step is, do they have the players to back that up? And I think they do. And vacated targets falls into the same conversation. It's about you're seeing, what does Sigmund Bloom call it? Or those football guys that, it's where their money, it's like where they put their money where their mouth is at the draft, right? I mean, they pay a first round pick for that guy. That's the end of, like, you can't hide how much you like him at that point, or don't like him when you take him in the fourth, so on and so forth. And vacated targets, I mean, this is significant usage that teams are getting rid of or adding. And that's kind of the same thing, I think, that the football guys get to with that. This is teams showing you what they're actually doing instead of listening to the coach speak. So, yeah, this data's vacated targets and stuff John Daigle tracks. Like, it's really important. I do think so. You've just got to use it to good effect. And where I'm just like a grinder, like it has been, and it is really easy to misinterpret as, oh, I can divide these targets up for next season. And that's not, I really don't think that's it. Like there's 200 targets left. Man, Chris Godwin could have a 200 target season. He didn't. Like the number doesn't correlate to the other number, And sometimes breakout players account for more targets than the team created, which would make more sense if that happened commonly. Normally, they account for less targets than the team vacated, which makes no sense if vacated targets are where those targets are coming from. I did want to dig into roll a little bit with this stuff, but you get to some of those problems with, smaller and smaller bins, and you get two teams in each sample size. But it does, like, John Brown targets obviously don't go to Mark Andrews if that move happened. So that's part of it as well. It's just a little more, I haven't been able to, completely write that up. I've looked into it a little bit, but for the first article, I was just looking at establishing a fair baseline of what this stuff actually is, what I can definitely say about it before I get to interpretation. And it seems very fair and even and evidence-based that targets that leave or are vacated are about team intent, not about players that will break out, not about passing attempts the next year. And we can read team intent wrong and all that stuff. MSV, to be honest, start the season in 2019, I thought MSV was going to own me. He started out really well and then came back to earth. And I was like, whew. Whoa, that was close there. He had like a 20-point game. He was getting a lot of targets to start the season. Maybe it was actually more draft capital, and MSV was a little better than I thought, but the team's already faded it, and they moved on to like Alan Lazard by the end of the season. Again, I don't think any of them are Randall Cobb, But some of that is luck. To be fair to the players themselves, some of that is luck. Like MVS got injured just as he was building up, right? I mean, I don't want to be too unfair to them. In an individual example, you can read the player. That's, again, what do you like? You like tape? Did you watch MSV and just thought he looked great? Then you were doing it right. You were looking at the player and thinking, what can he do in this team landscape? Like, we're going to have different opinions on that, but it's okay to have different opinions. What I'm trying to do with stuff like this is just to set up the landscape we're having opinions in, right? What are vacated targets? They're team intent. I'm 9% sure they are telling us about what the team is wanting to do, not can do, and not what players are going to do, and not how many times they're going to pass the next season either. I've got a track 2020. I'm hoping John Daigle's got his article up, actually. That's the next stage. I want to go look at what they're doing in 2020 and what all of that means for players coming in this year, right? First there was size and there was speed. Now there is Corey Davis. Q Homer Simpson disappearing into a butch. Again, man, I'm not getting into Corey Davis with you right now. He's not going to be everything I ever hoped he would be, very clearly. But he wasn't Brashad Perryman. He was not Kevin White. He was not Philip Dorsett. He was a different, better player than most that we call busts. I'm just saying, he had a top 25 season. He's never done, like, what we hoped he would do. It was what AJ Brown did. So you just get AJ Brown, but like, he's an above average player in the league. Don't forget that. But I said I'm not getting into Corey Davis. I'm not getting into Corey Davis. It's done. He's dead. It's just a loss. Apart from the fact he's not dead, like, you should value him as a top 36 wide receiver. All his other who's passing numbers were down. Yeah, Lazard really came on towards the end of the season. Again, I don't think any of them are it. Sorry, I've got an alarm for where I'm normally at work today. Yeah, I don't see anyone. I don't, but you should go look. What are the numbers that you like at the tape that you like? I don't see anyone on Green Bay that I like that much. Alan Lazard's fine. MVS is fine. I think much the same. I think Devontae Adams, and I'm kind of out on that team. Like, I don't know what it's doing. I don't understand what it's doing. And so I'm just kind of hands off. It might be a team in crisis. Is that what we call it? But Lazard was the guy at the end of the season. I'm not so sure about these split season views. Like, if you look through the last 6 games, like, it's just a split. Honestly, I think MVS, Lazard, I think they'll all just compete for targets and they'll have their moments next year again. They've got Aaron Rodgers, who's somewhat diminished according to QB evaluators, but he's still, good. So I think they'll still have their moments next year. Devontae Adams is pretty much the only guy on the team I want right now. And I love Aaron Jones, but his values where he starts to be a risk. I wanted Aaron Jones before he was valued where he's at, right? That's kind of how I play the running back position. But yeah, that's Green Bay. Sorry, I'm trying to think about players in 2020 using vacated targets. Well, the thing is, I went through and ticked off the ones that I know have left teams and moved to other teams, but I don't think I have it full yet. Like, where am I at with it? Like right now, targets added, net targets, vacated targets. Right now for 2020, I have Dallas vacating the most targets, which kind of makes sense with Cobb leaving and stuff. But I can't trust these. Like, I show you. This is where I'm at with my 2020 tracking, but I don't know it's accurate yet. Like Dallas, Houston. Again, this would be average level of volume. I haven't found any team vacating extraordinary levels of volume for 2020 yet, but I haven't finished looking. I don't think I've marked all the players that have actually left teams yet. It's just, it's preliminary. It's unfinished. No. They can support 2 wide receivers if you have Randall Cobb and Jordy Nelson. If you have Devontae Adams and Chris Godwin there, you'd have 2 top 24 wide receivers. That's the way I think of it. But yeah, I don't think they're in a situation to now. I don't think it's LaFleur, man. I think it's MVS and Lazard just weren't able to distance themselves like that. That it's not those kind of players. But again, at the start there, like MVS was functioning like easily over 25% target share at the start of the season. It just seemed like a team plan, though, because then it settled down. Adams came back up, and no one else ever got there again last season. I'm pretty sure. I can look it up. I mean, I'm sitting here. I have all this data. Where would it be? 4 for 4, maybe? Weekly targets. Did I do the percentage in this one? No, I haven't done the percentage in this one. I forget where things go. I haven't done the target share on any of these sheets, and that's really what we'd have to look at. I mean, it's easy to show you what players did in Green Bay last year, but that's for the whole season. I don't have something that's going to show us it on a weekly basis, I'm afraid. If someone else knows it, let me know. But I'm pretty sure no one else got back up to what MVS was doing at the start of the season. It just all went to Adams, as you'd expect, right? Yeah, this is what I got. Just this is the only thing I can come up with quickly anyway. Yeah, Adams getting 30% targets per game. MVS ended on 10% per game. But remember, I do think he started the season hotter than that. But again, then it just spread out to Lazard. Lazard was the one who ended the season with all the targets, right? He was the guy, but that's for a partial season, so even per game, it doesn't look great. And that's just basically how the field feels to me. You've got this guy, and I think if we're to compare it to something, that's what's happening in New Orleans right now. Like, don't get me wrong, Michael Thomas is amazing, but what's going on is there's no one else who's any good. You've got MVS over at 30%. This is what tends to happen. Even Keenan Allen and DeAndre Hopkins, there's a lack of competition. Notice that, like, it's still splits, so you can't use it to predict anything. But when Will Fuller's on the field, the epic level of dominance that DeAndre Hopkins has kind of shrinks a little bit. And that's what's happening in New Orleans. It's what's happening in Green Bay. There's no Will Fuller that can, run for 12 games. And there's no Will Fuller that can run for 12 games in Houston. That's the problem. Like, I had hopes for Traquan Smith, but he ain't it. And it's not it. He's not it because Michael Thomas is so good, or team situation, or vacated targets. It's because he can't do it. And that's fine. He's still going to be a good NFL player, but like, Gaden's better right now. And we will pass where I think we can expect much from someone like Traquan Smith based on where he was drafted. Yeah, look, Will Fuller actually kind of does it per game, but he's just not on the field enough. And so Hopkins moves back up to this incredible 30% target share threshold on a per game basis. Overall, Will Fuller can eat in a little bit. He's just a slightly better player. Stills is vastly underrated too, because he gets up to that teens in target share fairly consistently in his career, but he's not a Will Fuller when he's on the field, and he's available more often. Again, targets just seem so much to me about the player. That's why, like, efficiency is a problem, but it's interesting that Christian Kirk finally beat out Larry Fitzgerald for the lead role in Arizona in terms of overall volume. And yeah, Larry Fitzgerald missed time, and Christian Kirk didn't do it. We're really getting to crunch time for Christian Kirk. But if you look at his career, he slowly builds up the level of target share that someone like MVS, Alan Lazard, Will Fuller hasn't got there because he's been injured, but he's been injured. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. And Christian Kirk has been above average every year for his draft capital and his age and his career year. And last year, he finally beat out Larry Fitzgerald. It's a slow burn. It's a Tyler Boyd type burn. And the team also just like added DeAndre Hopkins, though. So like, I think he can be Will Fuller level target share to DeAndre Hopkins, though, and he will stay healthy. That makes him interesting. Like, players don't get up to this target share just because vacated targets, just because of team, just because of coach. When they get to like over these 20% thresholds, it's almost always a good player, one way or the other. Their career might end and we blame draft capital. Their career might end and we blame team success or injury. Cameron Meredith, happened to him. Tyrell Williams, I think that's draft capital and teams just kind of not really focusing him. And that's where like a good but not great player can get cooked by that team intent, by those coaching narratives. I can see where that lies. But like the level of volume he's been able to earn is just plainly different than the other types of players that we're hunting because of vacated targets or whatever else. You done? Ignore these two highlighted columns. There's something else. But yeah, he got up to this 20% threshold, which again isn't like wide receiver 1 territory, but 20% is not easy to do, even on a team that lost everyone else. And like, not everyone gets there just because everyone else gets injured. But then you see consistently, and it's just time to accept that the team sees him as going to use him in a more part-time role. So, but he still had one of the most significant indicators on his profile, and he's been good. I don't think anyone would say Tyrell Williams isn't good. MVS, you'll probably find Alan Lazard. You'll probably find some arguments, and that's just what it is. Like, I'm okay missing on Tyrell Williams. I just, or Cameron Meredith because he got injured. I don't want to miss on Tyler Boyd because no vacated targets when he does the same thing and has the draft capital and eventually breaks out in year 3. Yeah, I've been looking more and more at my points per game model. Like, I've got to start pointing out how useful that thing is. And again, it's not a where is it? It's not a projection so much as interesting to think about their median projection just based on their target share, their yards per team pass attempt, their age. It actually weights age a little bit. And something that keeps catching my eye. Like, I've really faded DJ Chark, but his role in production last year, like, it was really good, guys. Like, I don't want him, but I'd have to check, but I think he's way too cheap right now. What's his ADP? Why are there so many clicks involved in this? Not useful. Go away. Fine. Tools, Dynasty ADP. Show me that. Oh, come on. Yes, I am allowed in. No one look at my password. Let me fix this thing here. N'Keal Harry, yeah, again, I'm betting against him, which I hope means I'm going to get him wrong twice in a row. I bet on him, now I'm betting him against him, so I can get it wrong twice. But yeah, his year 1 sucked. I mean, there's no other way of looking at it. It's just a really bad year 1. DJ Chark, second year breakout. And that out. Yeah, he's going 45th overall right now. DJ Chark, that is. 22nd wide receiver off the board. That's decent ADP. Again, the market's fairly efficient right now. I think it's about to get less efficient. We get kind of crazy when it gets closer to the season. That's my hope. But, it's nice to have some inefficiency to take advantage of. But 22's efficient. That's a good ADP. He's going ahead of Stephon Diggs, which I'm not entirely sure of. But he's going in the right range. Like, he had a really good year last year. I don't know what to do about it. But I'm pointing them out to people, so maybe you guys will know what to do about it. Not a big fan of the player, but his role last year in his production was significantly awesome. Speaking of indicators, like Chalk shows up. It's really good. Who else was there down there? Like, I have player biases, but at least I know it, Christian Kirk shows up in the same range, projected for 12 to 13 points per game next year. Marcus Brown, projected 10. It's a really good floor for an age 22 wide receiver and one of the most successful teams in the NFL right now. Same with Mike Williams. I don't know. I've been digging through this thing a lot. I kind of like it. D.D. Westbrook, randomly, and still not entirely dead in Jacksonville, it seems. Like, he had 90% target share per game last year. 1.1, it was fairly low yards per team target. Team pass attempt, sorry. Actually, I'm going to show you this again. Easy prospecting if you don't want to get too nerdy, but you want to look at stuff. You find a rankings list and then line Whopper up in it. This is why there's significant reason to worry about Chris Godwin. Like, he was remarkably efficient, and it shows up because he had this low weighted opportunity rating, and yet was second in PPR points. I mean, he's really good. He can sustain it, but like, this is really easy prospecting, right? He's got less valuable opportunity compared to all the other wide receivers around him. There we go, points per game here. There we go. Same with Cooper Kupp. Again, he's existing in a bit of a crunch. But Keenan Allen, slightly underrated, right? I mean, this is basically what every analytics nerd is trying to show you. You organize by points per game, then look at their Whopper, and we find increasingly more complex ways of saying it. But this is it. And this is why I love Calvin Ridley, but the hype on him is a little crazy. Sometimes, like top 12 wide receiver, it's just not for me. Like, I love him right now because he's valued a little under where he should be, coming from that class. Marvin Jones, what analytics nerd hasn't pointed out to you yet that Marvin Jones is underrated? John Brown, Stephon Diggs, underrated. Stephon Diggs has got a whole different situation to comprehend into that, but still. And Whopper comes from airyards.com. It's not something you have to calculate. You just download the data by hitting download from airyards.com. And you can even sort by points per game because he's got fantasy points on there and games, so you can do the division. It's real easy, real quick. New team, underrated. I think this is why I heard some noise about James Washington not long ago. There it is. Decent target share with valuable Whopper. I think that's primarily a function of his ADOT. As you can see, he's just inefficient, but I think that's now just a function of him because I use Career Arc as well. Sorry, I don't know why I'm wandering through this with you guys, but I think it's a really good prospecting tool just to line up those two things and take a look at it. Target share, Whopper, see who looks out of place or in place. Anyway, DD sucks. Yeah, probably. And for fantasy, probably, but he didn't disappear last year, and that's interesting to me. I think Didi got draft capital. Really do. And that's partly why I don't like DJ Chark. Same with Keelan Cole. Both of them had target share that, MVS and Alonso, like they can only dream of in that 1 year. I think that speaks to player. But they can get draft capital, and then DJ Chark proves not to be too bad. And he had decent college profile, just not one I was enamored with. In his second year with second-round draft capital, and his role last year and his production on that run was great, and that's where I started. So you kind of say goodnight to Didi and Keelan. But again, I do think the players were probably better than they're ever going to get to show. But that's a function of thinking targets are about player talent as well. Interesting comment. It's funny that nobody's worried about Debo because we all think Ayuk isn't bad. I'm not worried about Debo because he got 800 yards and phenomenal target share for a rookie. Like that's one of the best signals we have. In fact, he was a little unlucky in the touchdown department. He could really bounce back up in that, even maintaining his role, and you should actually project more of a role going into a second year, right? So all of that is positive for Debo. I don't assume Ayuk is bad. The last thing I said about him on the crossroads is when I honestly looked at his profile, we just don't know enough. He had 2 years late. He started late, so you employ the Calvin Ridley rule, but 1 year was good. The other year was god awful. So the balance is what I do know is San Francisco suck at sucking wide receivers. Like consistently. Like Debo was pretty good, but they got lucky. And he wasn't there were better wide receivers right there. Very, 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 very visibly better wide receivers. They could have had better wide receivers than they took Debo. It's the same with Ayuk. They took Ayuk. There's a lot of hubris. Like the team stinks of hubris, and that might just be a function of the team is constantly having to make up for his quarterback, so it has to draft more for what their quarterback can do. Maybe that's a fairer way of saying it, and Ayuk probably fits that well. But analytically, he's literally 1 year good, 1 year bad. Both happen really late, so we don't even know what he would do without the advantage of age and physical maturity. That's where I'm at with Ayuk. Like, I think he's a really good value right now in rookie drafts because we know so little about him. But I kind of don't want San Francisco wide receivers. I picked up some Debo because, again, he had a great rookie year. But I kind of don't want anything to do with the San Francisco passing game outside of Kittle. And it's not because it's not a good team or I'm projecting regression or I don't think these players are decent. It's when you look at a team that's so good at and is also very clearly going to, it's not game plan, but scheme itself, right? It's like New England. It's one of the best fantasy teams, but really, do you ever really want to go hot and heavy for any of their players? Like Tom Brady's great. But you don't draft him top 5 even in his prime, right? He was never going to do what a Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson did. Julian Edelman, consummate value, always. But he's not a wide receiver. Like he doesn't, like New England running backs, always a good value, but you don't really want to draft him in the top. And it's the same with San Francisco. Teams are as smartly and intelligently and effectively scheming. It's great for the team. It's not so great for fantasy. It's kind of, they're good values, but I guess the term is league winner. You don't get many league winners there. Unless they're insanely good values, which, to be fair to you, Ayuk might be one of those insanely good values if they can scheme him like they did Debo. I just don't know enough about him. So, that's where I'm at with the San Francisco passing game. When you see teams just playing silly buggers is, I guess, what the English term would do. It's not straight up fantasy love. Like Baltimore's just straight up fantasy nirvana, a successful team running the way and passing the way you kind of expect teams to do. New England, San Francisco, they're all just a little tricky because of the way they do it. In San Francisco, I think it's because they have to, because their quarterback's limited. In New England, it's just because they're well, we know what New England are. They're just incredibly good at it. I think that's what Green Bay is trying to be. I think they're going to screw it up because they don't need to be, frankly, and they're not Bill Belichick. So, like, stop doing that. Yeah. Like, I'm not saying San Francisco sucks or anything, but I'm talking in terms of fantasy. I should make that clear more often. Like, Debo and Ayuk are probably going to have great, like, the team's going to love them. Like, I don't hate Ayuk the way I was like, Pettis isn't going to do, like, I don't see it with Pettis. That was basically my noise on Debo, on Pettis. And I think that's proven true. I don't see that on Ayuk. I can't see that on Ayuk. I don't see enough. I see 1 year that was a lot better than Pettis ever did, and 1 year that was a lot worse than Pettis ever did. So the average is slightly different weird noise than on someone like Pettis, you know? Debo was better than Pettis, but he did it all late. And that's kind of why I was out on him. But like, NFL production matters more. Like, over 800 yards, efficient, unlucky in touchdowns on a successful team. I get it. I'm not going to make sure I acquire him on all my teams. He's not that type of player. But, like, I don't not want to have him some places after fading him in his rookie year. Like, very clearly that's not a bad player on a good team. I'm going to want him. I'm now not out on him, but it's not someone like I want to madly add everywhere. And that could get me, again, like, because of that touchdown variance, could evenly have a 10 touchdown year on that same role. And, like, everyone's winning at the position because they have Debo. That's not going to be me. I'm not going that far on him. But I don't want none of him anymore. Is this the year Gallup overtakes Cooper? I love that, Jake. No. I've got to get Zach Reed on the podcast so we can have this argument. Because I need to argue it before I know for sure. Gallup, okay, this is what you need to have in your head. This is why, like, facts, okay? Gallup is not some fly-by-night thing. He was very good in college. He's proven to be very good in the NFL. And this is not no fly-by-night performance like Tyrell Williams. This is substantially proven he's good. Okay, he's a very good player. I think he's just going to get cooked. Like, Amari Cooper is all of those things with more value, and the team has invested more in him, as they probably should. And CeeDee Lamb looks like a phenomenal wide receiver prospect. The only argument I can come up for Gallup is that NFL stats matter more than college stats. So we can believe that Gallup is good literally twice as hard as we can believe CeeDee Lamb is good, because his stats are worth twice as much. It's kind of a twisting myself into knots argument, but we know Gallup is good. We think CeeDee Lamb is good. I would love to hear an argument that says Cooper's going to fade, but I haven't heard one that I'm really like, oh, okay, yeah, he's showing significant regression, or a significant reason to think that he would fade to Gallup or fade to Lamb. But I don't know of one. I would love that because I want Gallup to happen. But I do love Cooper. Like, it's a problem with too many things you like, you know? It's not a bad problem, but right now, Gallup's a little overvalued because of the likely scenarios that CeeDee Lamb is going to be better and more valued by the team. You'd expect to see some sort of trade, but, like, I don't try and predict situation. I try and bet on players, and all these three players look good. Like, they look great. But I do not think a Peyton Manning-like year is coming. But one way to win would be to bet on that and have it happen. I can't see it. But, like, if you do, don't let me talk you out of it. That would be what I'd say, because that's, like, you would be one of the teams going, like, one of one of the most, if that were to happen, that would be one of the most common features of winning teams next year. It'd be like having Dallas players, having Gallup, having Cooper, having whatever, like it was having Rams players in the year. The Rams kind of sort of came close to doing it. One note on that is, one of the ways of winning with the Rams that year was having Gurley, Zeke. Zeke should be getting devalued in Dynasty a little bit, but like sell Zeke season as started by Ryan McDowell's kind of opened up a window where people are willing to trade Zeke. And if we think this team can do anything like have those 3 wide receivers go off, like I think that's great news for Zeke. So if you're in a win now year, you can get a fairly young running back who's epically productive on that team this year. Like that's a winning move. Like instead of focusing the wide receivers, I might focus Zeke if I'm pushing to win this year. Yeah, that's actually a thing I might say this year. Like Zeke's a winning running back. Do I like AJ Brown in 2020? Yes. Project him in the top 12. It's not, you don't have to stretch to get him there. He had a really good rookie season. He will regress. We just imagine him getting more of a role. And the passing offense hopefully growing just a touch, not a lot, just a touch. However, I would not pay his value right now. I think it's fine if you want to, because that's Dynasty. If you get the right player at this value in their second year and it's right, it's great. I normally don't have that kind of value laying around in my team to spend. One wide receiver, I'm not one wide receiver away from having a good Dynasty team, so it's normally not worth it for me. And you can currently get Allen Robinson, Odell Beckham, DeAndre Hopkins, Keenan Allen. Like, I don't have to buy AJ Brown. But yeah, I like him a lot. He's a great player. What he did in his first year was frankly amazing. Like, it's what we hope. Again, he's what I hope Corey Davis could do. And it was really hard. It was really impressive. I love AJ Brown. He's great. I just don't like that team volume if we're going to talk price. Zeke, I haven't looked at the Scott Fishbowl pricing yet. I've got to. Spaceman says Zeke in SFBX. I can't honestly answer that. I don't know what the scoring is. Something like heavy QB scoring minus points for sacks. I don't know how much that affects value of running backs to tight ends, because it's a super flex still, right? Or a 2 QB. Yeah, again, Brown, I've got him projected in the top 12. He's the focal point of the offense. I don't think Corey Davis is going anywhere, but I don't think he's a threat to AJ Brown. I just think he's really low-priced volume right now. For Dynasty or redraft teams. Top 40 wide receiver, Randall Cobb last year. And AJ Brown should hit the top 12, which means he's the player you want. But I've only got 5 Dynasty teams right now. They're established. It's like, I'm just trying to be honest with you. I can't say, yeah, add AJ Brown everywhere. He's so expensive, justifiably expensive. I honestly can't add him anywhere. I don't have that amount of free volume laying around. Very few teams are one wide receiver away from winning. So it's not even worth going all in on a great wide receiver at a fair price. I'm looking for a great wide receiver at an unfair price, right? It's too low. Or a running back at a fair price, because those are the pieces that are normally missing. And if you're building, though, like if you're getting younger, acquiring value, you really don't think you can win in 2020, which happens a lot. Yeah, AJ Brown's a great asset to acquire in those situations, because it's worth spending on the capital on something that's very likely to happen and have great value for the next 4 years. Like, that's the situation I would say I would be, but I'm not in that situation, honestly, in any of my league. Well, there's one, but it's a best ball draft that's heavily focused on running back scoring, and so it's kind of a different situation. But if I was in that situation in a regular kind of league, that's when I'd be trying to acquire AJ Brown. I think some people would assassinate me for that, because like acquiring Odell Beckham's at their prime in their peak value is like also a decent value move, and AJ Brown is one of those players. But that's just not the way I play. Yeah, he's a focal point. Again, even with regression in all his stats, it's pretty easy to put him in the top 12. You don't have to stretch it to make people happy or anything. Like sometimes you do that with projections because no one's going to want to see Derrick Henry too low, or whatever. But AJ Brown easily fell. If anything, it was harder to cap him by, the regressions should be significant. But like his volume and what he should do even on average with that role, like you said, as a focal point, even of a low passing offense, should be fine. It's just harder to see because you can't make, Tannehill arguments after seeing him for a partial season, and we know what it is, but he's fine. He's decent. The 2018 Rams did not support 3 top 24 wide receivers. They did in spurts, but one of them was always injured, and that's the way that worked. But there was a period there at the start of the season where both were getting like basically all the let me try and put some actual numbers on there. They didn't support 3 top 24 wide receivers, but they did if you go on a per game basis. If I remember right, that's what happened. Again, you kind of like the only example of it happening is Peyton Manning. He did it twice on 2 different teams. So yeah, it's probably about Peyton Manning, right? Let's see. Let's just do wide receivers. All right. So in 2018, where's that rank? Okay, so Cooper Kupp was wide receiver 50. Robert Woods was wide receiver 11. And Brandon Cooks was wide receiver 13. So they had 2 top 24 wide receivers. Now, if you're going on a per game basis, you've got wide receiver 14, wide receiver 15, and wide receiver 21. So they did do it on a per game basis. But Cooper Kupp is wide receiver 50 for the full season. So they did it, but didn't do it. Peyton Manning did it like strictly. Like the full season scoring, he had 3 top 24 wide receivers. That's why I say it's a little different. For a second there, it looked like they could. But Cooper Kupp easy, and you can't do it with Josh Reynolds. That's what we learned that year. Let me see their target share here. Yeah, they were all over 20% target share per game, but Cooper Kupp only had 10% on the season because how many games did he miss? He came in late, right? And then I think it was the other one that got injured. Yeah, he only played 8 games that year. So they did it, but didn't really do it. That's not what we're hoping for Dallas. We're not hoping that, they have 3 top 24 wide receivers per game because Michael Gallup gets injured for half the season. That's not the hope. The hope is that all 3 of them play for at least 12 games and are top 24 wide receivers. That would be, I think, the goal here. And the only time that has happened, to my knowledge, is Peyton Manning with the Colts and then Peyton Manning with the Broncos. Like, that's it. It gets a little more interesting, as Jacob Rickroad likes to point out, if you want to include tight ends, interestingly. But it's a fundamentally different position to me. And we're not talking about the tight end. We're talking about 3 pure wide receivers in Dallas. So, yeah. Hey, Reginald. I appreciate you listening, man. Yeah, I worked hard on that one. I really think the wide receiver landscape is one of the most interesting, I would say most important, but let's say interesting to make everyone happy, and questions for 2020. And I do expect there to be more differentiation in points per game scoring, despite the fact the volume is going to stay lower for the position than we hope, because we're still hoping for 2011 to 2014 volume to come back, and it's probably not going to. We require more efficiency from our wide receivers these days. But I think they can do it. I think more than Michael Thomas and Devontae Adams can get there this year. Hey, Spaceman, thanks for listening. Appreciate it. They're talking about the Dynasty Crossroads episode, by the way. I do a podcast. This podcast, actually. Three takes sounds a little... Yeah, it was. What it was is I had this plugged in and I was talking into it. This is my microphone right here. And the little red light was on and everything, but I forgot I plugged it in after I opened Audacity. So Audacity didn't register it was there, and instead it was trying to record on the little speaker that's on my webcam for some reason. I didn't even know that. So it sounded really bad. I tried to clean it up a few different times with noise reduction and stuff like that, but it was just too bad. So I just had to re-record it, and it was heartbreaking. So the first take was longer and felt more natural. Like, I hate rehearsing shit. Not just because it's boring to do things multiple times, but I kind of like raw honesty. And some of that comes out when you just start talking, you know. I try to prepare a little bit, like I know roughly what I'm going to talk about. I look through the data and come up with my rough idea of what it's saying. But yeah, I try to just record verbatim. Yeah. Tan helped me link up AI. It still wasn't perfect, but a little bit of fixing. And he did it in seconds, and I don't know how he does that. But somewhere along the way, I had to create a new NFL database because FF Statistics died. I moved to DLF. And so I wanted something that I could freely just update every year without having to always do this, because it's a lot of work. But when I did that, I moved to a RotoViz database because that's going to be there every year no matter what. And Patreons are currently paying for me to have a RotoViz subscription. So I felt pretty sustainable. But like the problem with merging databases is literally the name column, like DJ Moore or D.J. Moore. And that sounds frivolous, but when you're talking about a 20-year history, there's a lot of players that don't match up. And going through one for one, like at one point I had over 2,000 players that I had to individually correct. And it's not always easy to know what that correction is. So you have to go look it up. You have to go match it up. And so when I moved to RotoViz data, the name column no longer, I managed to move over my college market base ID, which means I could still use the RotoViz data in my market share database, which is pinned to my profile and everything, but I couldn't hook it up to air yards, and air yards is really useful. So I was eventually dealing with it yesterday, and I posted about it on Twitter, and Tan and several other people were like, give it to me, man. Give it to me, Grinder. I'll do the coding for you. It's like, okay. But yeah, he did it in a couple minutes. There was a little bit of a problem because I use the downloadable data that everyone has access to. And the API, which is like the online hosting of all the data, is how Tan gets it. And those names aren't the same, and so we had to reconvert it. But yeah, eventually we're able to do it. I did find like 2004. I had to download, for some reason, I had to download 2014 data 3 times from ayards.com until I got the right data. I don't know why. It was messed up. But that's really important year. But yeah, I now have RotoViz data and AirYards data synced up, which is how I can make. I posted it, but this is the thing I was talking about. So you've got AirYards here, and you can match it up to RotoViz expected points. And here's all the raw statistics that I also get from RotoViz right here. And so now I can see like 2014 target share compared to Whopper. And I like being able to look, because it's a really important part of the story. AirYards is important. So I enjoyed that. On the right here, these different colored things. These are efficiency stats. There's fantasy points over and under expected. And I also did the same table for rookies, which I haven't posted yet, but I'll get to. So this is all the statistics for the entire draft class every year. And again, because I have AirYards linked up now, I can look at the AirYards change over time. So yeah, it's really important to me. It's just also a bear of a task, and Tan helped me out with it a lot. Dennis done more. Thank you, Crossover. I appreciate that. Sorry, I don't know what that is. Yeah, DJ Moore, like, not to call you out here, Reginald, but no, you're right. DJ Moore is projected in the top 12 everywhere. We might be wrong, but like no one should be surprised when DJ Moore becomes a top 12 wide receiver next year. Like where everyone's projecting it. Fantasy pros, I know player profiler are because I did it. ADP, even at DLF, like every source I know has, and you maybe some people don't, but every source I've seen has DJ Moore in the top 12. I have him in the top 5, I think. Like a big fan. And that's because it's the opposite problem with AJ Brown. Passing offense volume is fine, but DJ Moore was slightly under efficient, specifically in touchdowns. So you don't have to do a lot to him. It comes naturally. You just plug in his stats and let the average work the regression a little bit, and he pops into the top 12. Like it's not a stretched projection at all. Same with AJ Brown. He got there despite the fact we're reducing based on the average his overall efficiency. So both pop into the top 12 really naturally, which makes you think of this wide receiver boom, which is again why I was going through those trends. I could see that. Not everyone in the top 12 is going to be a rookie or a sophomore or a third year, obviously. Like, again, that's why I like Juju Smith-Schuster, Odell Beckham. But I do think we're hopefully going to see this reinvigoration of talent in the wide receiver position really pay off in 2020. That's kind of where I'm leaning right now. Still running back early, but not undervaluing wide receiver scoring because of what happened last year. I got to turn these things off, man. I got like 9 alarms for different jobs. DJ Moore, wide receiver 3 in Dynasty. Yeah, probably. He's probably ranked up there by most of us right now as well. Right? I was told he couldn't separate and was bad on tape. I'm just saying. Analytics so far, that was a big success. Here's DJ Moore. Wide receiver 26 points per game, but he said that he received projections are really close. Okay. Yeah, I don't know how he got there. Let me see here. There we go. Top 12 wide receiver projections on the screen. Let me see here. So yeah, I got DJ Moore on the top 5. Let me see, what did I have to project him with to get there? Yeah, 25% target share seems really reasonable, right? 91 receptions, 1,200 air yards, 1,200 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns. Like that seems pretty reasonable to me. He's got a fairly decent schedule, 140 targets. Like it was not a stretch to get him there. He's really efficient in yards last year. He just needed a few extra touchdowns and he's there, and that's what I gave him. Well, that's what the projection thing gave him. Wide receiver is difficult. To his point of wide receiver being close. One of the things about wide receiver is you kind of have to over-project teams because you don't know who's going to get injured. And so if you project everyone's median, like quarterback scoring goes through the freaking roof. And because you don't know who's going to fade, who's not going to get their median projection, right? If you're projecting everyone at the median, then teams are at least 1.75 more productive than they are any year. And so it's a really difficult balance. And it's the same with wide receivers. Like if everyone hits their median, there are some players that jump over other players who probably aren't going to be there, going to miss games, they're not going to hit their median. And so it can be a tricky balance to do that with projections, to be fair. Wide receivers and quarterbacks specifically, because again, not everyone hits their median, but if you're projecting everyone to hit their median, scoring looks inflated, positions are harder to separate. Like I'm only now just getting to the point where I think we can comfortably do a first run and not have that particular issue. Get in my league, Steve. But that's the problem with a high-value wide receiver. That's why no one's paying up. It's what I was just saying about A.J. Brown. You're not a wide receiver away from winning, and that's kind of the price that those high-value wide receivers pay. Wide receiver value is weird. Like, it's why you're meant to draft them in rookie drafts, not because they pay off early or they pay off at a higher rate at running backs. That's a part of the argument that everyone misses when they talk about drafting running backs. It's like, well, yeah, but you want to try buying those wide receivers when they're very clearly, because the best wide receivers show up year 1 and 2. That's where the top 12 wide receivers really show up. And by the time you know that's definitely one of the guys, like, you have to pay league-altering value to get them. A.J. Brown right now, DJ Moore right now. So that's the counter. That's a consequence of drafting running backs. Trading for wide receivers sounds great until you realize you can't really get the A.J. Browns, the DJ Moores, the Odell Beckhams, the Mike Evans of the world. You kind of have to hope for it. DeMarcus Thomas, someone who came down in value after his first year. Marcus Brown, maybe hoping he proves to be a wide receiver 2 one day, because his value is a little low. Deebo Samuel, like we were just talking about, you end up swinging at those middle round upsides that sometimes still work out, to be fair. You could have taken a shot on Tyreek Hill after he started to show he was breaking out. And in fact, I sold him. I had him on my teams. I sold him when he started to show that he was going to be good. And then he hit the top 12, which is something I didn't see in his range of outcomes, because I'm always still learning. And there was an opportunity to buy him then. There was an opportunity to buy Devontae Adams, because he took a little while to break out. But those are the wide receivers you end up trying to buy in Dynasty, in honest to God leagues, because we normally don't have that value just laying around. And you're not one wide receiver away from winning, ever. So if you don't draft these guys, which is smart because running backs you should draft, then you end up hoping for the Devontae Adams of the world, so one that take a little longer. A.J. Brown, DJ Moore didn't take any time. And that's why no one will pay up, because they don't have the value. They'll have to kill their team to get it, because they're drafting running backs instead. It's where the rubber meets the road of dynasty analysis. It's easy to say get young wide receivers, but which ones? We all start from the startup draft, because you can start saying things like, make sure you draft that guy in the 5th and the 6th round. But the minute they're DJ Moore and they're AJ Brown, they're in the 2nd or 3rd round. They're in the 1st round in some drafts. Like, it's easy to say when you start from the startup draft. But in reality, if you're playing in a dynasty league that's serious and you're not in year 1 anymore, good luck feeling comfortable paying for a DJ Moore and AJ Brown. It's not that the value isn't realistic. It's just that there's always other moves that make more sense for a team. There's an Odell Beckham out there right now with just as much upside, who's easier to trade for. Not that the value is much different, but do you really want to trade DJ Moore or AJ Brown? You kind of feel like keeping the hotness, right? Whereas Odell Beckham's stained. You're kind of like, okay, I'll trade him for value. That's just a reality that we sometimes don't miss. If it doesn't come across when we're talking about dynasty strategy. Or that's what I find in my leagues. Maybe other players just don't have those problems, but that's what I find. That's why I like old wide receivers too. You just never have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about that with Keenan Allen or Tyler Lockett. Allen Robinson's proving remarkably difficult to buy, weirdly. I think people are onto that one. Damn it. But Juju Smith-Schuster too, still not easy to buy. But there are always options at wide receiver, because people value too much youth in the top 24 instead of players that are actually going to finish in the top 24. And the youth gets value. It's just, I've talked about this too long. Terry McLaurin, yeah. Very likely to finish in the top 24 and be the breakout sophomore. That always happens. We get a sophomore breakout pretty much every year. At least one. He looks good. I have player biases. You just kind of got to accept that and ignore me on some players, I guess. And I have a big bias against Terry McLaurin because he didn't have a great college profile. But I will see very clearly NFL stats are worth twice as much. He had great NFL stats. Now interpretation, I don't see him getting more efficient. The team sucks. Kelvin Harmon kind of came on towards the end, and I like Kelvin Harmon more just as a prospect. Which I was obviously wrong on, just to go back again to the clear and present facts. I think he might have a hard time on that team, but for what he did in his first year, you should value him more than I'm saying. Like, I just have player biases, man. Which is fine. I'm okay missing on a few guys. Like, I'll catch up. I got over it with Tyreek Hill, right? Well, not all of Tyreek Hill, but you get over it. Hopefully when they hit 25, 26, and people start to sell them cheaper because they're stained by age in the prime of their careers. That's stupid. Devontae Parker, overrated or a value? What's his value? Let's start there, because we could use ADP. Or what do you think his value is? And then we can talk about whether that's over or undervalued. I think Devontae Parker's worth a first-round pick. Most people seem to think he's worth like pick 11 or 12. I would say he's around pick 108, and that's a big bet. But like, I'm a little higher on him than most people, I think. I can say that. I would trade the 1.08 for Devontae Parker, but you don't have to, so you should expect more back at that value. Because value is different than, player ranks. You can trade the 111, so you should get more for the 108. But, like, I think that's a decent value for him. I know we're kind of past rookie drafts for most people, but that's just my baseline value meter. If you've got a different valuation on him, like you want to, then let me know, Reginald, and I'm happy to offer an opinion there. What do you think about him? Do you think he's a top 24 wide receiver, top 12? Well, I was just going to look. I don't know where I have him. Yeah, I have him in that Devontae Parker, Brandon Cooks type variant. He's in that region with Terry McLaurin. So I value those two players about the same. I don't think the market does. I have Mike Evans way too low. Just throwing that out there. Julian Edelman looks way too high to me. I got to bring that up at the next player profiler meeting. Pardon me. DJ Chark looks way too low to me in my own projections. Cortland Sutton looks way too low. Yeah, actually, Cortland Sutton's fine. Cortland Sutton's fine there. Kind of like my Marvin Jones prediction, though. Again, the projections aren't just a function of me, though. And I like that because I certainly shouldn't be the be-all and end-all of projections. They're run through the player profiler team, and that way, they catch shit I wouldn't catch as well. But like, some things happen. Like, I don't think I should have Julian Edelman where I do. I don't think I should have Mike Evans as low as I do. And he's not low. I just think he should be high, is what I'm saying. I think T.Y. Hilton is probably the high end of his range. I don't know how many of you look at player profile projections. No, T.Y. Hilton's fine. It's just Mike Evans' rank looks a little low to me. AJ Green looks a little high. But it's fair. I mean, that's what the model ends up spitting out. It's something like, okay, I can see it. Tough. It's tough to disagree with your own model sometimes. Finch top 12 guy for me in 2020. I would say for Devontae Parker, you were very high on Parker compared to the market, which is great. It means you've found a guy you want to go trade for. that's where you start being careful with value, right? I don't think you have to pay top 12 guy to get Parker. Make sure you're getting fair value back. But honestly, kind of with you. I think, I kind of see that. I could kind of see that as an upside. Tua's not going to be throwing the ball, which sucks. But Fitzpatrick sometimes, right? And I'm really interested to see what Parker does. There's not a lot of comparisons to what Parker did last year. So it'll be interesting to see. Yeah, they are, but they're also through Player Profiler, Reginald. There's a link there somewhere. Just letting you know. I'm not sure they're meant to be, so I'm kind of... yeah, and that's the thing. Like the market likes, and I think that's fair. Again, the market's efficient. I think it's fair to be higher on Terry. He's younger, had a great first season, everything else. But yeah, I kind of rather have Parker. Evans looks low because I think of him as a top 12 wide receiver, and he's not in the top 12. Again, I think it's fair. You just saw my top 12, and I think it's fairly fair top 12. But he's, I'm high on Allen Robinson. I'm high on Jarvis Landry. AJ Green looks a little bit high, and you've already had 3 players, and that just makes Evans look a little low. The reason is Chris Godwin looks to fade in efficiency a little bit. Mike Evans looks to fade in opportunity a little bit because we're forcing a little bit more over to specifically the tight end position. We think the team will pass a little less because it will be more successful with that Jameis Winston on the team as well. All of that just limits Mike Evans in relation to these other players. But yeah, to my eye, I'm like, if this was value, I'd be buying Mike Evans right now. Like hard. I'm going to ask if we can move him up anyway, so it's not going to stay the same. Like, I just don't think that's reasonable. Projections aren't ranks is the other thing to note. Like what they plan to do at Player Profiler is take reasonable middle of the road projections and then rank them based on upside. So Mike Evans will be ranked in the draft kit a lot higher than he's projected, for example. And so that's kind of the way one of the ways we're trying to counterbalance the difficulty in that wide receiver position I talked about. No, that's that's a fair answer, Spaceman, but no. Realistically, when it gets down to brass tacks, you got to remember the reason Matthew Kelly is successful in this as a business, he's a very good businessman, and you don't actually make smart decisions liking and loving players and being high and low on other players. Like he is very cold rubber meets road when it comes to reality, So Chris Godwin is lower than Mike Evans, for example. And Mike Evans looks low, to say that. No, there was no push. Make sure you make Godwin really high. Like I expected him to mention it at least because he's also funny in person. But no, he's just like, yeah, okay, that seems fair. Okay. I mean, he doesn't have to hit twice, right? He was all over Chris Godwin last year, and that definitely worked out. He got his value in content and accuracy from Chris Godwin. He doesn't have to do it again. So I guess that could also partly be why. I don't know. We have a working relationship in that he tells me stuff to do, and I do work really hard to get it done. So I'm not going to pretend to know. Jamison Crowder's too high. I should be writing this stuff down. Crowder's a little high, Evans a little low. I rarely look at it wholesale like this because it feels like, my player preferences would then affect projections. And I'm trying not to do that, right? You just want it to spit out a fair projection. You don't want to go, well, I like this player more, so he should be higher, like we were just talking about with Chris Godwin. I can't do that naturally. I get very emotional about players because I love them and I hate them, even though I'm rooting for all of them. And so it's my, like, looking at it like this, I'm like, I'm going to go move Mike Evans up, damn it. I don't even know if that's fair, but it's what I want to do. Like successful people like Evans and Evan Silver and Matt Kelly, they don't struggle with that shit. They've already got cold-hearted business mogul in their background. I'm an emotional hothead. Renfroe and Paris Campbell. No. Renfroe probably going to get more volume than I want him to get, and be better than I expect. But I don't see a top 24 player in either. I think Paris Campbell, if he played out the season, based on his small time on the field, it looks like he might have been better than I was saying, just to be fair to the Zach Reeds of the world. But not getting on the field hasn't predicted any player ever. In year one, I think the team's already moved on. Unfortunately for Paris Campbell. I don't see top 24 upside in him. I don't see it for Pittman either, but I think they're both decent players, and it's the same with Renfroe. Like, they're fine value players, but where they get hyped as sleepers, they normally, like, I just take the old guys everyone thinks are terrible because they're way too old in that range. Like, I don't think we're looking at, next year potential first because they hit. But, you take any player at a certain value. Paris Campbell's a decently drafted prospect with a below average every year. So overall, pretty good profile. Who got on the field very little and scored a touchdown whenever he was on the field. So he looks efficient. Yeah. That's me on Paris Campbell. And Renfroe, I think the value got sucked out of him the minutes people started quietly. It's very quiet, to be fair, talking about him. I'd rather have Randall Cobb. I think that's the level we're talking about with Renfroe. He does have a very amazing process. A lot of people complain at me and at him about how he doesn't own his bad takes and stuff, and that's all fair. What do I know? I don't pay attention to people's other stuff like that. And we got in a tiff once over what he said about Jake, but so I'm not going to pretend I don't know that he can take things too far, but he's doing it for the sake of content. Him as a person, in my personal experience, wonderful to work with, very professional, very fair. Like, no complaints whatsoever. He's great on that side of thing. Him as a person, it's fine. Like, it's not the same thing, So yeah. I'm not going to talk about one of the titans of the industry too much on a freaking crappy live stream. It feels dangerous, even though I'm saying good things. But yeah, he's very Bayesian. Like, on his podcast, he always talks about the Bayesian process, but that's because I honestly think he's he's a smart man. But yeah, like what we were saying with Chris Godwin, he's not getting hot-headed about it. He looks at it, he's like, yeah, that's right. That's it. On a podcast, he'd argue death over it, I'm sure. It's a character he's playing and playing very well to great success. So yeah, I mean, it's just an extension of him. Like, he is Bayesian, like you say. He is smart. He does have hot takes. He does prefer running backs early. Or he's not lying, but it's an exaggerated form of who he actually is. In my limited experience with him. Why is it that when rookies rebound? Why? I don't know. I can speculate some answers. Teams get tired of it. They get bored. They move on. There's a lot to learn, and it doesn't. It's not great not to get time on the field to learn it. Sometimes injuries are hiding the fact that they can't actually earn their way onto the field. We know teams kind of smudge the numbers on that a little bit. Oh, he's got a hamstring injury. And the reason I say that, that's probably the question that you're answering, is when you look back, the consistency of production leading to more production and efficiency leading to more efficient is very strong. Like players that don't get a 10% target share year one or above basically never break out. There are exceptions like Julian Edelman, Adam Thielen, but they can all be explained with draft capital, right? So the Paris Campbells of the world, those second, third round picks really don't get that excuse. So when I look back, and because that's true, when you actually go look, players that didn't play a lot don't break out later, because players that don't get significant 10% volume, 400 yards year one, don't break out. So the ones that didn't because they're injured, they're included in that. And that's why I say it's not a good excuse. And also, I just distrust the reports on who is injured and who is not, especially in the offseason. Everyone who didn't have 1,000-yard season, basically, is suffering from an injury. And I can't call them liars. They probably were. It's the NFL. Everyone is probably injured all the time. And I'm sure it affects them, especially as a rookie. And it could, I'm not saying it can't happen for any. It can happen for any of these players. They're playing at the highest level in one of the most talent-dense fields than I can think of. Very few fields get condensed at the level of talent as the National Football League. If you look at English football, there are hundreds of divisions and teams. The talent can spread out over Premiership to Division 1 or whatever it's called now, Division 2, Division 3. Talent can spread out and be found throughout, right? There's the National Football League in college. It's and only 32 teams. There's not 204. I think 240 there is in one division in the English football leagues. So it's all condensed, which means that Paris Campbell's phenomenal. He's just in this condensed talent distribution. It's impossible. The only other thing I can think about is like astronauts. You get the best of your best, and then you make them compete to see who's the best. From temperament to intellect, that's the only other comparable level of condensing of talent. So when you say you're not good in the National Football League, you're essentially saying you're one of the best players in the world at this particular sport, at least. So I do like to keep that in mind, because that means that Paris Campbell could always happen, because it's hard to be that good at something, and he's there. But the reason I say it's not a good excuse is because when you look at the history of breakouts and what players did after their rookie season, it's not impossible, but it's very slim odds. We're talking 1%, 2%, 3%. Players that don't hit certain, just very reasonable, very low thresholds of opportunity year one, whether it's because they're injured or they're Laquan Treadwell, they don't tend to do much after that. Now, there are some, but it's a very narrow path to walk, and most of them had no draft capital, and that doesn't fit players like Paris Campbell. I think I said it twice now, but it's because I'm trying to be, I'm not trying to make you miss on a player because of this trend, so I'm trying to explain it very accurately. Now you know it. You can bet on Paris Campbell when you like, because you know what you're betting on, right? And you should. If you watch the play, if you see a stat that you really believe in, that I don't know, that's behind some paywall, okay, you can do it. You just know that you should expect to have to pay less because there's this lower percentage chance, then go for it. But make sure you're betting on that, which means you're talking late second, third round picks maybe, and players hit from that range all the time as well. So you could be giving up one of those players to do it, but it's also a fair price for someone like Paris Campbell. He should be worth less than he was last year. Let's just say that. It's almost as if football gods don't want certain players to prove they're overrated. Yeah, probably. John Ross. I would love to take a victory lap on John Ross, because there was some serious, smarter than me, better than me here. They make money at this. analytics people who like John Ross because of the diversity of his role in college. Like he was returning punts, he was working special teams, he worked as a cornerback, and they thought that obfuscated it a little bit. And I was a little nervous by it because it was a good argument. So I'd love to say we know John Ross is bad. What we know of John Ross is that he's injured. I haven't seen enough in the NFL to know if I was right or wrong yet. But we do know that he's injured a lot. Kevin White, I think we got proven right on. You know, he was injured early, they said, but he's had more than enough time since then to not be injured, and he has not been injured in seasons. I just don't think he's able to cut it. And I remember listening to an interview with Kevin White in that rookie season when he's doing interviews for draft capital, essentially. I remember loving the kid. He worked real hard to elevate into the higher level of college, and he did very decent when he got there. And then the kid seemed hardworking. Like I was kind of rooting for him late, but his profile just that's why this stuff works. Sometimes it's nasty. Hey, Tacit Assassin 13, otherwise known as Zach Reed. All I hear is bet on Karis Campbell. That's because you only listen to yourself. I mean, if all you do is talk to yourself in the mirror, that's probably all you're going to hear. I'm old enough to remember when John Ross torched the Seahawks week 1. And again, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think he would have Kevin Whited, but in all honesty, he hasn't been on the field enough for me to really say, look, that was right. And he is a first-round pick, and he is whatever. So he's just not a player I'm going to bet on because I still believe that profile I put out of him when he was rookie. But I can't be unfair to the kid. If you're injured, you're injured. You really can't help that. Like like you say, he's done good things when he's on the field. I mean, maybe. I just doubt it. I'm still in the same place as I was on him in his rookie season, except for the fact the longer it goes, the less likely it is to happen. So the more confident I feel. So at this point, I feel really confident. Of course, with Devontae Parker, that backfired. But Devontae Parker actually profiled well as a rookie, so it's a slightly different night and day thing. Hey, Zach, way to speak up. Like, I'm in here for what, 2 hours? You finally show up and say something? I've been in here for 2 hours. I didn't even realize that. Having too much fun. Yeah, I don't even know what to do with that stuff. Crossover. Yeah, they're training on their own. They can't get into the facilities. They can't work with each other. Some of them are going through like an incredibly emotional and country-changing time right now. Well, all of them are, and some of them are feeling it more than others. Like, I don't even know what to do with that reality stuff. Here's one bit of good news for wide receivers. And the only comparable situation that I've heard anyone bring up, Jacob Rickroad asked me to look or consider the player holdout. When did that happen? They held out for the whole preseason, basically. They didn't get to train together, essentially. I wasn't playing fantasy back then, so I don't know much about it. But he said that happened. And after that year, rookies and wide receivers exploded, essentially. Now, not exploded, but we had a lot of breakouts. We had really good production from the wide receivers. So that's positive for wide receivers. Interestingly enough, down year for running backs. Intuitively, I would have thought it works the opposite way. When you can't train together, you can't work together. But the closest comparison we have is the year that the wide receivers sustained and did better than running backs, which is interesting. It's just one example, and it's not the same thing. But I thought it was a really good point. It's a really interesting point. A lot of you guys have been watching NFL for a lot longer than I have. I've only been in the country 10 years. So you might have a better reference point, like you remember what that was like or what happened then. But that would be an interesting thing to run through your brain. Like, remember the player holdout? How did it feel? What happened after that? Like, that's the best comparison we have. That I know of, anyway. Sorry, I'm checking my Twitter feed. I've got like a whole 18 missed messages, so gotta check in on the fans, which is actually just people telling me why I'm wrong most of the time, and normally they're right. So fans aren't quite the word. Owners, maybe. $2011, yeah. McCall Hardman thoughts. All right. I don't like McCall Hardman. He's not my kind of player. I didn't like his rookie profile, all that shit I've been saying, pardon my language, about John Ross, frankly. Here's the fairest thing I can do, though. All right, so that points per game model I was ranting about, it's got like a 57% correlation to the variance of fantasy points 1 year to the next. We also have a sophomore or rest of season score. Actually, let's look at it through that way. I've been working on this rest of career score, so combining college profile with their first year's stats. It's the highest correlation I've ever produced in NFL stats, actually. But it's not finished. I'm still working on it. But this is probably the fairest picture I can give you right now of McCall Hardman without my bias. This rest of career thing right here, it's still in progress, okay? It's still working on it. But as you can say from the sample size, oh wait, where is it? Where's the correlation? Yeah, right here. It's correlating to fantasy points from the sample size I was using, about 77% of the variance is being accounted for their year 2 and 3 points per game scoring when I combine their college profile with their first year points per game. And also, what else am I using? I'm using fantasy points over expected, so if they're efficient, and their points per game, so if they're actually productive and how productive they were year 1. This is how it ranks rookies from last year. A.J. Brown, Terry McLaurin, Marcus Brown, which is why he looks like an interesting value to me right now. Now, to point this out, and the reason he's so high is because his draft profile, his post-draft score was really high because he was a first-round pick. So it's not that I think Deebo Samuel should be undervalued, should be under Marcus Brown. It's just that Marcus Brown looks like a good value based on what they both did year 1 and what their college profiles look like. DK Metcalf under Deebo Samuels is interesting. I'm not sure I feel that way, but that's what this is spitting out. McCall Hardman, interestingly enough, comes up pretty high. He comes up right after Deontay Johnson, 8th on the list. So that's the fairest view and the most successful R-squared I've got actually so far. I can give you of McCall Hardman. He was decent, and I recently read another good article suggesting, as this is doing, that because he was really efficient, 46 points above expected, and 8 points per game, even with a terrible college profile, it makes him 8th best in the class. All right. So now I said that, I do want to point out that A.J. Brown is the only player really in this draft class that gets projected anything like a 2014 wide receiver. Notice they're all like averaging 13 points projected or above. When we go to 2019, or 2019, yeah. A.J. Brown is really the only one in that range. Terry McLaurin is close. Marcus Brown are kind of close. Deebo Samuel a little further. DK Metcalf. That's where it stops. Like, it projecting him to be 9 points per game on average for the first few years isn't great. I would also point out, like I just said in the Crossroads this week, this is a different wide receiver era, and this rest of career score isn't adjusting for that yet. That's also why I didn't include volume in this, because while volume is one of the most useful, I kind of wasn't interested in combining volume when we've got such a recent volume change at the position going on. So I think McCall Hardman, if I'm going to be honest and as unbiased as I can, looks like a potential breakout. Maybe in year 3, maybe he could have a top 24 season at some point. So now's not a bad time to acquire him. I don't think, but he's not a player. Honestly, I'm not adding him. I'm not looking to trade him. If he turns up on my roster at a good value, I'm going to do it. but like I'm riding the no McCall Hardman for me, thank you train. To be, if he hits, I have to say, hey, I got that wrong. That's where I'm at. But in all honesty, I see why some people like him. I just don't think he did nearly enough. I think his efficiency is on way too small a volume to take seriously. I think the team depth chart was more than conquerable last season, especially after week 1 and Sammy Watkins did whatever the hell he did. And McCall Hardman could barely earn any volume. I don't see it. But I can see why some people would want to make that bet, because he was efficient in his first year on volume that's worth paying attention to, just not enough compared to his team situation for me. I just don't see it. He wasn't phenomenal or anything. So that's me trying to twist myself around to say, yeah, I see it. I don't want it. Like, he's not my guy, but trying to do a good job for someone honestly asking a question. I can't tell you to fade him. I can tell you that I'm fading him because I don't believe in his college profile, which is worth half as much as his NFL stats, to be fair. So, yeah. Does that answer it at all? I tried. He's cheap, he's fast, and plays with Mahomes. Yeah. Yeah, okay, yeah. That's a fair take. That's why we like Byron Pringle as well, to be fair, and he had a better college profile. But, yeah, I get it. And he was efficient his first year, a decent kind of volume. What did he have? I should know that because I keep saying it. He had 65 expected points. Like, it crosses that 50-point threshold, but man, he had like an 8% target share. That doesn't cross the 10% threshold we were talking about, but he was low drafted, and you can see where the balance is. Decent sleeper at the right price. Is not the guy I bet on in that range. I'm more interested in Deontay Johnson, Darius Slayton. More interested in Marcus Brown because, frankly, he's not that much more expensive right now. And so I end up not having him. And I'm happy about that. They're not. No. We will never see the like of 2014 again. Get it out your head. Let me show you these rookie stats again. This is 2014, man. This all green across the board. The most rushing attempts for wide receivers, the most targets, the most points per game, the highest level of rushing share for rookie wide receivers, the highest level of target share ever, the highest level of Whopper, the highest level of air yards, average ADOT apparently, the highest level of racer, except any set since 2008. So 2018, you can make a case that 2018 is better, and I make that case all the time. Okay, what else? The highest level of expected points, the highest level of rushing expected points, weirdly, the highest level of total expected points. Well, the only more efficient class, like I said, 2018 and kind of 2019, but that's the only place they get them. We will never see 2014 again. There is no the next 2014. 2019 pales in comparison to 2014. But to go back to my episode on the Dynasty Crossroads this week, we're also looking at a very different era. Look, there's a very clear line right here. After this end of a boom of this target share increase era for rookies, we'll then see this decline because of this terrible period right here. So 2018 and 2019 look like the best wide receiver class since 2014. And because it's a new era, we can compare them to 2009. We could compare them to 2011. We can compare them to 2013. That's a great year. It's not 2014. Like, even if you adjust by these two different eras, these very two clearly different eras, this one and then this one, like 2019 is not 2014 of the last era. It's 2009. It's 2013, maybe. I really, and the 2018 class, just as good, and they've already broken out, by the way. This is why you should focus 2018 wide receivers. So all hit the top 24 already, and they are the equivalent, in fact, better, of every way of the 2019 class. 2020 doesn't look like 2014 either. No one looks like 2014. And 2020 looks like it could be another good year like 2018, 2019. We're seeing a little bit of a boom after a 3-year lull at the position for rookies. But no one is 2014. No one will ever be 2014. Like, it's just, I get the urge to compare it to that, but there are other good classes, and it's just a good idea not to go too hard to 2014. Like that, no measures to them. Hey, Eric John Flynn. Catch you next time. Thanks, Peter. Thanks for checking it out. I didn't know you were here. Oh, you're the one I asked about McCall Hardman. Appreciate it, man. Thank you. Yeah, again, yeah, it's just crazy. It's insane that it wasn't even Evans the first year, really. Evans was part of it, but it's Odell. I have to go and look him up, obviously. Let's go through 2014 wide receivers. Do I have career year in here? No. Okay, I can't. But yeah, it was Odell. Mike Evans. Yeah, Mike Evans is up there, actually. I'm wrong. Who else was drafted that year? Brandon Cooks was frankly amazing that year. Jordan Matthews, he was that year as well. He was incredible those first 2 years. Jarvis Landry was that class? Yeah. I'm pretty sure. Like, you're just not going to see it. And to be fair, that's not a better year than like when DeAndre Hopkins and Keenan Allen were drafted. It's just all of those guys have the draft capital. All of those guys have the college production. Even Keenan Allen, we had to worry about his draft capital a little bit. And DeAndre Hopkins took 2 years. It just all happened. It all happened perfectly. It all happened year one. Pretty awesome. I think 2018, if I'm going to bet on a class over the long view to produce that many good players, that's the year I'm betting on. Calvin Ridley, DJ Moore, etc., etc. Devontae, of course, yeah, but he had a dud of a first year. But yeah, even he came from that class. Technically, Adam Thielen comes from that class. That was the year he was undrafted free agented. I think he's usually counted as a different year, but I think that's the first year he records a stat with the team. So, like, even the undrafted free agents that year were better. My rookie 101, Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, J.K. Dobbins, Cam Akers, DeAndre Swift, then C.D. Lamb, Jalen Reagor. I'm pretty sure that's the order. Been a while since I looked. I'd have to go look at my rookie draft board the same way you can to actually see them. On the Google sheet, posted on Patreon, on Twitter, free. My draft board thing, it's got all my rookie ranks. I haven't changed it since because I like to do a post-draft and a pre-draft and then just hold the course, you know? That way I know how well I did later. And if I keep changing it as new stuff comes in, then I don't know how well I did. It just looks better. Here it is, 2020 rookie board. Oh, I still have Clyde Edwards-Helaire above Jonathan Taylor. I thought I switched that post-draft. Oh, okay. Apparently, I'm just going back and forward on those two. Got the rest right. Then it goes C.D. Lamb, Jalen Reagor, Justin Jefferson, Denzel Mims, Jerry Jeudy, who I think I have a little lower than most. Then Keyshawn Vaughn, Brian Edwards. little low on T. Higgins, probably. But that's where I left it at, so I guess I'm stuck with it now. So technically it's Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but Jonathan Taylor is probably the one I want. In all fairness. Probably just did that because he's got such a decent floor that it feels like I can't get it wrong. Does anyone want that link, by the way? I should have probably posted that. It's been a while since I did. Just in case you want to own me later for the ranks that I put out and got wrong. Oh, last draft board I was looking at, I had Kalen Ballard above Jalen Samuels. So, that's always a fun one to remind me of. Kalen Ballard, jeez. I'll post it in the chats here. Copy and paste the link into the browser and you'll go to that same thing. My best Dynasty team? I don't know who my best Dynasty team is right now. I kind of fouled out in 2019, as again, I've been fairly honest with. My best Dynasty team. I just kind of tanked my best Dynasty team. That was the best ball team. All right. I only got 5. Feeling underwhelmed. My Trade Addicts team is probably my worst. Actually. I'll tell you what I can do, which might be more to your point. I can show you my highest owned players using this happy little app that fella created. Oh, I'm in 6 leagues. Oh, that's because of the eliminator that's about to go off. Brandon Cooks, Drew Brees, Andy Dalton, Dak Prescott. Got a lot of Corey Davis still. Derek Carr, Keenan Allen, Juju Smith-Schuster, Odell Beckham, Christian Kirk. Those are my most owned top 100 Superflex players. My most owned players tend to be a lot of the cheaper players because I can add them off the waiver wire and they're cheap. I speculate on off an undrafted free agent. So you've got Kendrick Bourne. I know Zach Reed was recently talking about how he was the Giovanni Bernard owner in all his leagues, but I think I can challenge him for Giovanni Bernard ownership. Yeah, RIP Devontae Freeman. Again, I kind of got outplayed in 2019, if I'm honest. I got caught with a lot of dead weight. I ended up paying up for Antonio Brown in some places, and Andrew Luck was a heavy feature of most of my teams. I lost a lot of value through fairly unpredictable events. And that's really made my team struggle. It's not a great time for my Dynasty teams right now. I bled a lot of Andrew Luck and Antonio Brown shares at the door, which is where a lot of my value had ended up going. But yeah, I've been trying to increase these shares. Like I just got Brandon Cooks into the top 50%. I want to get Lockett in here. I want to get Juju Odell because I would like that better. I would like the way that would look if I posted it to people because that's the honest truth. Those are the players I focus. Keenan Allen, Juju Smith-Schuster, Odell Beckham. Tyler Lockett is someone I want more of, but I'm struggling to get. But yeah, those are the players I own. I own a lot of Deshaun Jackson right now. Seems decently cheap. Gardner Minshew. Okay. But when you only got 6 teams, these percentages are a little, I did have upwards of 20, but they were a little too unfair. It made me look a little too good. I was playing a lot of free flea flicker leagues, and my win rate was kind of insane. But it wasn't honest. When you're playing against non-serious players and picking up leagues every time there's an orphan, like I wasn't being honest with myself with my success rate. So I've cut it down just to the 5 leagues where I have serious players in, like Zach Moss is in here. He's in that no-name league. And I want to see what happens. I want to see what happens when I'm just playing against good players. I imagine I'm going to get just canned. 2019 was not a good start to that. But yeah. those are the players I've got mostly on my teams right now. So, well, yeah, it's unlucky, but I'm trying to own it, right? I mean, people who are good at things tend to get lucky an awful lot. You know, Jacob Rickrow gets very lucky an awful lot. The guy who traded me, Antonio Brown, got lucky. Or I try not to blame luck too much if I want to be good at something, you know. But I do feel like I got a little bit hurt. I did have a lot of Austin Eckler, by the way. I've been trading it away to try and recoup value. He was up there for a while, but I just bled Austin Eckler shares. So yeah. So that's hopefully how the way I play Dynasty works. I hit a lot of Austin Eckler's, and so then I can recoup with that extra value when I take big bets on all the players that age out. Andrew Luck, like that was in Superflex leagues, man. I just don't know how to recover from that. Like I drafted him real high. I faded the QB position because I had Drew Brees and Andrew Luck. Luckily, I looked into a lot of Dak Prescott. But losing Andrew Luck's kind of a big deal. It was for me. I really shouldn't have gone in on Antonio Brown. But again, I stand by the process, man. Tis what it is. You gotta own it. I wasn't playing pre-2013, especially not Dynasty. My first league was probably Redraft 2014, and I had a lot of Odell Beckham, Kelvin Benjamin, if memory serves. That's who I had on those teams. So, you know, I thought every year was going to be 2014, and all this fade rookie hype was nonsense when I first started. And then we get 2015, 2016, 2017. I was like, what? Is this a new normal? And hence the tracking of it became a thing. I was like, oh, no. Okay. I see what it is. You drafted him. That's not as bad. That's a decent bet. And I advocated for that. And to be fair, on a points per game basis, okay, I won't do it, but he was like top 5. And he played one game. That's how. And I still think he was just as good, which is what people were saying. He wasn't good anymore. When he was on a field, he was just as good. He just had a lot of other stuff. I traded for Antonio Brown, and that guy saw me coming. Like it was multiple first-round picks because I was talking big about Antonio Brown. And for a second, when he got traded, when New England picked him up, I thought I was going to be able to recoup that value, but that league wasn't having anything of it. So I tried to ride it, and then he's off New England after game 1. So what do? Just got Antonio Brown. Happens. Antonio Brown is the best value in redraft. Maybe. Probably not. But maybe, I guess. Add him onto the back. The thing with that kind of shot in best ball is that feels like one of the gutsiest type of moves. If you're Antonio Brown, it just feels like a dead roster spot if it doesn't happen. And whereas best ball drafts, I see people do those kind of moves all the time. It's like, I don't want any dead roster spots. I'd rather have another defense, another kicker. Multiple ones of those are actually, correlated to a higher win rate, for example. Yeah, Kelvin was good year 1, and that was pretty obvious at the time. Then when I got into college stats, I sold him pretty quick when I moved into Dynasty, but there you go. But yeah, it was just a fit in the offense. And that's where I still have things that I picked up that season, just playing redraft. Like the story, literally the narrative around Odell Beckham made no sense year 1. Does anyone remember what that was? He was a touchdown guy. He was just going to be a red zone target. He was just a touchdown guy. I was like, this guy's tiny and fast and highly drafted. What? Touchdown guy? It just didn't make any sense that he wouldn't play a larger role in the offense the further it went. But everyone expected just rookies to rookie. And so it was just pretty easy to pick up Odell Beckham. Mike Evans as well. I kept dropping and picking up Mike Evans. I seem to remember it taking a while for him actually to get going. But like the offense had no one else. But again, some of those narratives I've learned are narratives. Some I've learned are part of bigger signals. It was really fun. I remember first year I played, one of my friends in the league, I was just filling a spot. And I messaged him, and I realize now he must have been nervous that it was collusion. But it was my first year. I was just trying to help out. So I messaged him. I was like, this is a team I'm starting this week. Am I making any mistakes? And he was like, speaking of tight ends, I had Tony Gonzalez and apparently a second tight end. Give me a break. It was 2014 and 2013 and my first year. And he was like, yeah, you got to put the Hall of Fame tight end, dude. I was like, but look at his projections. And he was like, just put the Hall of Famer in. And I did, and he was right. So production and bet on all players started very early for me. I can't even remember who I had in instead of Tony Gonzalez, but I dropped that guy the next week. Had a Hall of Fame tight end. Just going to keep betting on that. And fuck kickers. Yeah, it was your bog standard, average standard, literally standard redraft scoring league on ESPN. I actually love the ESPN platform for playing fantasy football. I love that. The utility of the draft room's a little crazy, but the look of the page, it's all real neat. It's all real easy. It's actually pretty easy to get projections and stats. I still track games sometimes through that league, because I'm still signed up to it, and you can see play-by-play scoring on the ESPN app if you have a league, and it's some of the best up-to-date play-by-play data you can get just as a game plays out. So I love ESPN. I wish they would take Dynasty a little bit more seriously, actually, and maybe make the function of the draft room a little better. I understand the way they have it lined up, but sometimes it's been really hard for me to find players when they've got it for positions. I forget it's been forever since I drafted on it, so I can't remember. Yeah, 3 defenses in best ball. That's one I do know. And multiple quarterbacks, right? He did catch TDs, but he wasn't just a touchdown guy. Like, that's the part that didn't make sense to me. Like, yeah, I get his catching touchdowns, but the guy's like 4'3". I know it's not how tall he was, but like, that's not a guy you just use in the red zone. This is a guy getting early opportunity because he happens to be really good, and he's scoring touchdowns at a highly efficient rate as a small guy, which at the time, if you weren't big, you can catch touchdowns, according to the stuff I could read on ESPN anyway. And a lot of weird things like that and other stories just made me start reading more and researching more. I got to the playoffs. I don't think I got to the final that first year, put it that way. Did pretty well with my team of rookie wide receivers. Yeah. Basically can't play Dynasty on ESPN. That's why I ended up on Flea Flicker. It took me so long to find somewhere I could play a Dynasty league, because I'd heard about this thing, but I thought there were like secret private leagues somewhere, because ESPN, I couldn't find any on ESPN. I couldn't find any on Yahoo, and that's all I knew. I kept Googling it, and Flea Flicker and My Fantasy League at the time did not come up with Google searches. Like, I couldn't find where you play. I found My Fantasy League at one point, but it's really hard to like sign up for My Fantasy League and join a league. That's not what it's set up to do, right? It hosts leagues, and people in those leagues share them with the people that they want in the leagues. So like, I couldn't figure My Fantasy League out. But Flea Flicker, you just go. There's even a whole list of teams with, open teams, and you just click take over team. You don't even have to ask anyone. And I wasn't into talking to people, especially at the time. So I just kept taking over teams and drafting, like, who's this guy? And yeah, Flea Flicker is great for that. If you just want to play some fantasy football, meet some people. I dropped my Flea Flicker leagues, like I say, and I still feel good about it, because you chat with those guys for years on the message boards. You get to know some of them. You end up in the same leagues with a lot of them. And they were real fun. So I was sad about that, but it's just too much. Like, there's a few good players, and then there's a lot of dead teams. There's a lot of people who have no idea what they're doing, like no idea, no idea. You don't want to know what I got David Johnson for after he started to break out, for example, stuff like that, or what I traded Vincent Jackson for at the end of his career. But anyway, they're a lot of fun, and you can find good leagues over there. I'm not saying you can't, but I wanted to be in leagues with people that I knew. All of them actually knew, and I knew they were all good. And that's what my 5 leagues are right now. I'm probably going to add a few more because I can't help myself and I want to do some drafts. I'd like to pick up some decent redraft leagues, actually. Redraft is fun. And like I said on a recent podcast, you got to remember it's not any shorter term as a league. It's just the team roster changes. It can be just as sustainable as a dynasty league. But you play redraft. You change the players out year over year. And dynasty isn't better. There's more to do, there's more fun, and you can play in the off season. That's great, but like it's so much more frustrating. It's like 2019 killed my teams. Like, you're stuck with it. You gotta beat it back, and not that's not fun, and I don't enjoy it. But like redraft doesn't have any of those problems, and there's still challenges, and they still get to play fantasy football. Like, redraft's great. I don't think dynasty is a better version. It's just a different challenge. And there's a lot more frustration and difficulty with dynasty leagues. Dynasty is just more difficult, for that way, which is why I like it. Three QB, 3 defense, according to RotoViz, the highest win rate. Yeah, that's what I thought. I don't play a lot of best ball. The only way to play best ball is to pay $10 go, basically, and I can't diversify on that kind of value increase. I might be able to eke out $100 a year to play best ball, but people who play best ball playing a lot more than 10 of those leagues on fantasy draft or whatever. Like Jake has like 24 going at different times every year. I don't know if he's planning to, but he was also always heavily on draft and stuff. And I'm like, I don't have the week-to-week capital to spend on that stuff. Yeah. That's, as far as I can tell, it's the way we all start redraft. It's the way we all start dynasty. It should. It's a challenge. What if you walked in? Crossroads just said he started his first dynasty league and slowly figuring out he didn't know what he was doing. Like, I don't think it would be as fun. Nothing is as fun when it has to be fun to start with. You have to enjoy it. But if you immediately understand everything and do great the first time, like, so why I dropped my flea flicker leagues, like, too high a win rate. Winning is fun, but it's not winning if it's not a challenge, right? So you're meant to come in and suck and go, oh, I did everything wrong. Let me try again. That's what keeps you rolling the dice. It's what makes us dynasty degenerates. Like, don't worry about it. I don't think anyone gets it right year one. Take all the advice and read all the stuff you can. And no matter who you've got in your corner coaching you, come year 2, you're going to be like, oh, I did a lot wrong. I did a lot wrong. I think that's everyone. I do think Twitter's kind of a must for dynasty. I wasn't on any social media. I don't like it. Turns out I love Twitter. But I just kept getting the advice. You've got to sign into Twitter if you want to do more of this. It's like, okay. And that's why I made my account, like July, whatever year it was. I wasn't even signing up to post. I was just trying to find out about fantasy football. And people were like, you really, like, Twitter's where all the fantasy football stuff is. I was like, okay. I did take forever to decide my app because I knew it was permanent. And eventually I just gave up. And that's, like, I couldn't find anything snappy or fun or good like Tacit Assassin 13. So I just went with my name, and then I got to the W, and I was like, hey, if I just put a DY on the end, it says howdy. That's kind of cool. I'll go with that. See you later, Reginald. Thanks for checking it out. Nice to talk to you, really. Hope some of it was useful, because God knows I'm not entertaining. Really appreciate the question, man. So yeah, I guess I should head out here soon too. I think I'm wearing everyone out. All right. So we talked about vacated targets, and then a whole bunch of other stuff. Try to be. Thank you, Crossover. You have a good one too, man. Yeah, I think everyone's leaving me, so I think I better get out of here. I'm going to try and do some more YouTube videos, actually concise, contained videos, because I haven't produced an actual video recently. They've all been live streams. But I am going to try and do at least one live stream a week. I missed last week, but it was one hell of a week. It just didn't feel like there was a lot of interest, and there's a lot going on, so why would there be? But yeah, I do try and do at least one live stream a week. So if you have any questions, you just want to chat football or anything else, I try and do that. And I'm going to try and produce more video content, like the what is Dominator and Breakout Age, mainly because it's really useful to have a link to just send someone when they ask me a question instead of having to re-explain it every time. And so, yeah, thanks for checking out. I will see you again next week. Hopefully, I'll get some more video content out as well if anyone's interested in that. All right. See you guys later. Bye.